Hi guys, and I hope you're all well on this wonderful gloomy day here in the UK or wherever you are listening in the world. I hope that you are amazing and having a great time. So today I'm going to talk about this lightly on Spotify because I don't want to scare away the masses. But if you want to go into it more in depth, I'm going to actually discuss it a lot more this week on Patreon. So plug in my Patreon, go over, take a seat and sit down in the diary room and wait for me and I'll be over there. So today, this episode is going to feel slightly uncomfortable for some people, and maybe not at all for some, but it's about addiction. But I really think these conversations really need to be starting to be had in neurodivergent spaces, because when people hear the word addiction, they often immediately picture drugs or alcohol. I know that I do. It comes with bad connotations. And ADHD, or shall we just say neurodivergent dopamine-seeking, can actually show up in so many different ways. And it doesn't just have to be drugs and alcohol. Sometimes it's shopping, spending. I know for me, for a lot of years, it's been food. For some people, I know it's sex, nicotine, energy drinks. Doom scrolling is a major one for me. Gaming. I know a lot of people with hyperfocuses on gaming. Impulsive relationships. Real risk-taking behaviour, whether that's with driving or anything really. Compulsive behaviours, online validation, or even constantly needing stimulation or chaos just so you can feel something. And honestly, I think a lot of neurodivergent people quietly carry a lot of shame around behaviours that they don't fully understand about themselves. And this is because it's not spoke about, because there's this connected shame with it, because addiction is always seen as something bad. Underneath many addictive or compulsive behaviours, there's often so many root causes, and that's often emotional dysregulation, overwhelm, burnout, dopamine depletion, which we'll go into in a minute, trauma, definitely, chronic stress, nervous system in tatters, or sometimes simply wanting to feel some kind of novelty for 5 minutes. ADHD or ADHD brains are literally wired differently when it comes to dopamine and reward systems. And research shows ADHD brains often have lower baseline dopamine activity, which means our brains naturally seek out novelty, stimulation, urgency, reward, emotional intensity, and quick dopamine hits, because these things temporarily increase our dopamine, and we have a lack of it basically. And that's partly why boredom for us can feel physically painful. Waiting rooms, traffic, and etc. And impulsivity happens incredibly quickly for us. And we struggle with delayed gratification. We chase stimulation quite often, and we become obsessive and compulsive. And we can sometimes swing between extremes. And honestly, once I understood that, so many of my own behaviours suddenly made much more sense to me. I have gone through a life with being addictive with certain things at certain points and not knowing when to stop. So I completely get that. So when somebody put it in relation to ADHD, it actually perfectly makes sense. A lot of neurodivergent people aren't weak, and they're not bad. They are just simply more susceptible to these addictions. We're chronically understimulated and we're emotionally overwhelmed a lot of the time. A lot of us are burnt out, dysregulated, and trying to self-soothe with whatever gives the brain temporary relief. Sometimes self-soothing does come in the form of drugs, alcohol, or any other addictions, because they give the brain temporary relief, escape, comfort, or even dopamine. And the statistics around this are actually pretty bloody significant. Even people I know, people with ADHD are statistically more likely to struggle with substance misuse, more vulnerable to addictive behaviours, more likely to engage in impulsive reward seeking, more likely to struggle with binge behaviours such as eating, drinking, drug taking, anything that you can binge, even Netflix, more likely to develop issues with gambling, nicotine, spending, and compulsive habits, especially when our ADHD can go undiagnosed, unsupported, when we mask, when we misunderstand ourselves, or when it's quite often combined with trauma. Because then people often spend years unknowingly trying to regulate their nervous systems through external coping mechanisms. So self-medicating or self-substituting things. And honestly, I think it's one of the saddest things is how many neurodivergent people carry huge amounts of shame around behaviours that actually make psychological sense when someone sits down and actually takes the time to understand them to you and the brain beneath our ADHD behaviours. Because sometimes it's not even about the thing itself. Sometimes it's about escaping overwhelm or chasing relief, numbing ourselves emotionally, needing stimulation or avoiding emptiness, self-medicating, as I said earlier, avoiding painful emotions, or just trying to regulate a really overloaded nervous system. And I think ADHD burnout makes this even more intense for us, because when your brain is exhausted, overwhelmed, and emotionally dysregulated, and now we know dopamine depleted, the urge to reach for quick comfort or stimulation can become much, much stronger. That's why so many ADHD or ADHD people describe cycles like, I know it's unhealthy, but I can't stop it. It makes me feel good. It's either or nothing. So I know a lot of people with ADHD who drink or etc. And they're either all or nothing. They can't have one drink. They're all in or they're all out. People get obsessed with things with ADHD and the struggle with moderation and chase intensity. And addiction doesn't always look dramatic either. Sometimes it looks like spending hundreds impulsively in Primark, or emotional dependency, or needing constant stimulation. Binge eating is a humongous one. Doom scrolling too, hypersexuality, nicotine, online shopping for dopamine has just blew it out the water for me especially, and needing chaos to feel mentally stimulated. And when you understand ADHD through a nervous system and dopamine lens instead of you're just lazy and disorganized lens, because let's face it, a lot of us have heard that all of our lives and started to internalize it, suddenly so many things begin to make more sense. I also think conversations around addiction in neurodivergent spaces need way more compassion and way less judgment, specifically from ourselves as well. I think we're way too hard on ourselves, because behind many addictive behaviours is usually a nervous system trying desperately to regulate itself somehow. And honestly, I think so many people sit there thinking, what the fucking hell is wrong with me? When actually there are actual neurological emotions and psychological reasons underneath all of these patterns when we think about it or have it explained to us. Over on Patreon, as I said, I'm going to talk much more deeply and personally about some of these themes in a more vulnerable and private way, so feel free to come over, take a seat and wait for me. I'll be over with some stories soon. But we're going to include the emotional side of dopamine-seeking, shame, coping mechanisms, compulsive behaviours, and how these patterns can affect your relationships, your self-worth, your impulsivity, and your everyday life. And if you need more in-depth advice or, you know, just relatable stuff on that, do come over, because I know this topic can feel incredibly personal and so difficult to talk about openly. But if this episode made you feel seen instead of judged, then I hope that this helped. And honestly, that's exactly why I wanted to make it. Sending lots of love to you guys.